Well, welcome everyone. Good to see everyone. The way that the participants list populates is in alphabetical order, so I always end up calling out my same friends, but as ever, nice to see you, Adam, Mr. Harvey. We've got a lot of attendees today from all around the world. So good afternoon to friends and colleagues in the UK, good morning in America, and good evening to our friends out east. We've got people, I think, from Dubai, India. We've got a really good a group of people today. So this is the third in a series of webinars I've been doing about Teams rooms and hybrid spaces. There's been massive interest in that. Most of you who are on the call are probably here because you've seen the LinkedIn posts that I've been doing, and it's been absolutely a fantastic experience doing that because we've had some really good conversations. This is a very big subject, and I think we're all learning a lot this year in 2022 about this year. And you know, by engaging it deeply myself, I'm really learning an awful lot too. So I'm going to keep moving quite quickly. This is actually quite a big deck to get through, but it's fast moving. It's very graphical. It's not this is not death by PowerPoint. Well, I hope you'll agree with that by the time we get to the end of it all. What I will probably do, depending on how we do for time, is I will take a break and have a look at questions and the chat, see if there's anything that would be useful to bring up at that point. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going through to the end. Now, I will be respectful, of course, of everyone's time. We will finish. I'll finish the presentation on or by the hour, but I will stick around afterwards for a while, depending on if there's any good chat or debate or questions that I can deal with. But I am going to try and get to the point where I can deal with some questions before the end of it. So, without further ado, let us get going. I was so professional last time on the last one, I forgot to actually click the share button, but hopefully everyone can see that, and we can get underway. So this is me. Some of you know me already, but I am the owner and director of Visual Displays. I'll talk a little bit more about the company a bit later on. I am involved in the in the standards side and the academic side of displays and lighting. I've been heavily involved in standards for many years. I currently lead AVIXA's Standards Steering Committee, SteerCo as we call ourselves. And I've written or co-written a couple of the, well, co-written or led a couple of the standards that we talk about today. I'm also very glad to be working on the new UX standard, the new UX design for AV, which I'll talk about a little bit today. And I've been involved with the leadership of AVIXA as is now, but Infocom as it was in my day, and was president in 2012. So that's enough about me, and let's get on with the subject in hand. So what we're going to do today is we are going to look at the workspace, look at hybrid spaces, look at meeting rooms and hybrid spaces and teaching spaces in a granular way. It's mostly, to be honest, it's mostly about meetings more than about teaching, but there are some general principles here which I think apply. But the high level point about this me is that my approach is first of all that the whole space has to be regarded holistically. It's all one system. You'll hear me riff on about that during the presentation. And the other thing is it's about breaking the entity down into the right bite-sized pieces. So it's identifying the addressable pieces and looking at them on a case-by-case basis. I mean, if you think in terms of the you know, of what needs to be done in a space. You know, it can be quite a sort of knotty group of problems and issues. And so this is this is my way of doing it. But the thing is that I will argue very strongly for taking this kind of approach, a kind of a structured approach, and breaking it down into elements. I'm not saying this is the only way of doing it, but this is the way that I do it, and people I work with, and this is my approach. And anyway, I hope you find it helpful in illustrating. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a sort of a space that doesn't look very good, and look at it in part by part. Like I say, we're going to move really quickly through this. There's a lot to cover. Very often people who I've given this presentation in various forms, dozens of times, and people often find the slide deck very useful because it's quite a useful communication tool and some way to get started with and get your teeth into the subject afterwards. So as you can see, I've broken the space down into 8 aspects: layout, design, acoustics and color, natural light, lighting, display, reflections, furniture, temperature and ventilation. This is my approach. I think there are other ways of breaking the things down, but this, to use the expression, this is how we eat the elephant. We eat it one sandwich or one bit at a time. And also it helps to identify who we get to help us and how we work with the other people in there, which I think one of the practical issues here is not just, if you like, thinking about the space design, but if you like, the realities, the politics involved. The organizations tend to be quite siloed and so forth. And I think that particularly when we get further down the presentation, you'll kind of see that sort of practical thing, I think, can be almost as important as thinking about the room itself. It's all very well having good ideas and so forth, but it's actually getting them implemented, or I think so anyway. The basic kind of room 101 design principles is to think about the layout of the space, where people don't block each other from the screen. The display might be too small, positioned incorrectly. It's a big subject, but room layout is absolute 101. Then we move on to the design and acoustics and color. Color is very important for all kinds of reasons. First of all, because there are certain colors that are very good to be background colors for VC cameras. That is a real theme of the work that we're looking at here today. The VC camera has to be regarded as the VIP presence in the room, because that's the conduit to providing good video, to giving the remote participants really good experiences. So it's the background color, whether or not it's textured, and also the amount of reflectivity. We use a reflectivity index, and that's referenced in the VC lighting standard that we use. And also, reflective surfaces. We need to think about surfaces being reflective both acoustically and in light. When we think about the room in this kind of a way, we have the opportunity to think about the finish of the room of being not only providing the right surface for light reflectance and the right color, but also for acoustic treatment as well. And I think that that's one thing that really seemed to come. I don't know if you agree with me, but that's something that seemed to come to the top much more last year. The audio quality of the room. People were realizing that although it's okay, you can hear each other quite well within the space, the remote participants weren't getting such a good deal. Then there's the issue of natural light. Now, natural light can be a bit of a rogue element, and it's also something that needs to be factored carefully. A lot of studies about the built environment find that people prefer to be close to natural light, but they tend not to drill down on whether people prefer to be able to see the open space, or whether it's the light itself that means something to them. But natural light can be problematic because you need to keep the lighting within a sort of range of color temperatures in order for the VC camera to work well. And also, at certain points of the day, it can flare up, and at night, for example, it can be very dark. So thinking about the control of natural light is pretty important. And that would even the sort of the aspect of the windows, whether they're north or south facing, and so on. Lighting. Now, this is a very core area, key to my heart. The friends I've worked with, colleagues I've worked with in Google, they will know that I'm a very big advocate of indirect and diffuse lighting, but direct lighting can be a real issue, and within a space that you need to have good evenness of illumination throughout the space. And that's something that when you do have poor lighting in a room, that can be picked up and exaggerated within a camera. Again, thinking about the VC camera, it's got its own EV, it's got its own exposure control mechanisms, and that's something that you need to know and learn about. But presenting a well-lit space as well as the individuals within that space is massively important. But I'm going to talk about lighting a bit more further down the road. Now, a very big fail in 2021 and previous years was the installation of displays that are far too small. Now, we've had this month we've had the release of Microsoft Front Row, and you can see from that we're kind of firmly moving into the world of what was good old picture-in-picture, but where you've got the screen broken down into various elements. In the case of Front Row, you've got the content in a window within the main window, and then you've got the thumbnails of the individual meeting participants underneath that, like a sort of a rose gallery, if you like. Now, the way that the existing DISCAS standard that we have within Avixa, which is the standard that sets the image size, but also the closest and farthest viewers and viewing angles. But coming back to image size, the thing with DISCAS is that in DISCAS, the display height is synonymous with image height, and the point now about hybrid spaces is that the content window for which the DISCAS rule applies, we need to apply DISCAS to that rather than display size overall. Because if you've got say the content window with an important spreadsheet or something like that in it, it's the people in the back of the room that need to be able to see it as well as the people in the front of the room. So when we use the 3% element height in DISCAS, which is the kind of standard starting point, and that which then equates to the 6:1 rule, what you find looking at when you're kind of scaling down this kind of picture-in-picture, this Teams Room Front Row thing, is that you're probably down to 4.5 or 4:1 rule. So displays need to be much bigger than was ever thought about before. Also, they tend to be with the smaller rooms where you've got flat panel displays, large format displays. They tend to be too bright and often too low contrast to do with ambient light. The impact of lighting on displays can be catastrophic, really. And this is an example of an anonymous campus, but very on a lot of estates, people have this situation where building services control the lighting. The lighting then effectively works a way to kill the display that you've got there. So and this is an example, if you like, where the actual practical issue of working with the other stakeholders is so important. And I think having strategies for dealing with that is part of it. It's one thing, isn't it, to identify you've got an issue, but how are you gonna deal with it? So the next part of the mix that we look at is reflections. Now, reflection, most of the lighting scheme in a room, the delivered lighting scheme in a room is indirect. when you've got a bunch of luminaires on the ceiling, it's actually the reflected light from the other surfaces in the room that's delivering most of the lighting there. So this whole thing about the reflectivity, and it's not just the amount of reflectivity, but whether it's specular or diffuse. Specular is like a mirror-like, or when you have a sort of shiny front of a display panel, which I will come back to, and it's having that kind of a balance. But the reflectivity of surfaces is actually is one of those things that can be a real killer to the room design, and very often that's a case where, if you like, the aesthetic of a room has trumped the function of it. And this thing about form over function has to be done in balance. Of course, it's important that a room is aesthetically pleasing, but it's also got to be able to do the job of work that it was designed to be. Then just think about reflections even more. This is one thing that a number of you hear me going on and on about, but it really does kind of bother me, really, is that I think the days of using shiny fronted displays are really over, particularly in hybrid world, because it's just so unfortunate that people are basically looking at remote participants as if they're sitting in a sort of bright, shiny aquarium, and that's one very easy way of making a real step change in improvement, by just changing your specification to displays without the shiny surfaces. And there are a lot of great displays available from the manufacturers there. Then furniture is very important, and that breaks down into a couple of parts there. Having chairs that are suitable for purpose is very important. You don't want them to be too soft, have bad posture. Again, there's a balance with furniture, is that you don't want it to be sort of you don't want the room to be uncomfortable, but you want the space to be suitable for purpose, and you want the furniture to be supportive of the functions of the space, one of which would be probably to be able to do extended sessions, to be able to work in that space all day if necessary, and to still be comfortable and alert at the end of it. But another part of this is that the table and the tabletop is actually a very important part of the lighting, and so the actual color and the reflectivity and how shiny it is an important part of the mix. And then the last way of breaking it down, this is the thing that of course the AV element has the least control over, but nevertheless the H&V, the temperature and ventilation within a room, are very impactful on the way that people are able to operate within a space. What a number of studies that are beginning to that people have been working on are showing that that there is many rooms during the course of a day, when a room is well occupied, the CO2 levels build up, and it just causes drowsiness. So anyway, that was the sort of the gloomy look at the subject. And so now the thing is what how do we deal with these issues, and how do we address them? And as I said at the front end of this, I think my firm belief is about taking this kind of structured approach. It's not about a fixed answer. It's not a cookie cutter thing. It's an approach, and it needs to be mindful and respectful of the needs of the individual spaces. It's about using the guidelines and standards in a very appropriate way. The AVIXA standards, for example, that I live and breathe, they're really, really useful. But I think that when you're looking at a room in a total way, in a holistic way, these standards do have to be used in a critical way. That you've got to take them and use them in the way that works for you and the room purposes and the space purposes. And that's actually what I spend a large part of my working life doing, is using standards, but using them, as I say, in a critical way, to make sure that they they have relevance to what we need to do for them. And in the case of today, of course, that's hybrid space design. And again, because in these sorts of projects, we're dealing with a number of different stakeholders, from the building owners through architects and so forth, right the way down it, and other specialists and trades. It's also about how you treat with them, how you deal with these people, and how you help them and to help you and help each other to come up with a good result. So I'm just going to shout out here for the AVIXA standard, which is the new AVIXA standard, which I'm sitting on the task group, which is the user experience design for audiovisual. I think this will be quite a game changer for AV in general, but for hybrid spaces in particular. It's a lovely approach. It's basically us versionizing the principles of human-centered design, user-centered design, for which there's a kind of big complex ISO standard, and we're kind of versionizing that for the AV market. And I see it in my usual way of reverse engineering. What we're aiming to do is to be able to come up with describing what the deliverables of the space need to be in the form of hard metrics, and working backwards from that, and then getting to the point of calling out which technology is needed to do that, and not the other way around, which is often the way that it's done with an AV. So part of this is to think about the kind of user profiles that you have. The other really revolutionary thing that the UX standard does is is that the essential part of the process it involves talking to the users. That may sound fairly radical, but for people who design systems, very rarely get exposure to that. So I think there's a whole new world of interest and actual business opportunity, as well as the opportunity to create far better results. But also there's a mindset and a methodology of it being iterative. The idea being that when you put a system in is that you're doing the very best that you can, but by experience and by engaging with users, you will find ways iteratively of improving that space. So there's a kind of a mindset that is brought to that process as well. And then excuse me. So then it's from that process it's to think about the performance specifications, and then rooms have different modes of use. The left-hand column there, those that apply to hybrid meeting spaces. Right-hand column, refers to some of the examples of use profiles for teaching spaces. And then if you like, we get down to the sort of the practical part. To actually optimizing. You have an actual room, either a room that's there, you've got to refurb, or you're working off plan, but you've got an actual space that you have to optimize. So at that point, it's about really understanding what that space, what it offers you and how it constrains you. In the case of the refurb, a detailed site survey is an important part of the mix. And again, this is not thinking about the room design. It's not as if you want to make it uncomfortable, but it's about making the space that's conducive for the workflows and the activities that are going to take place within that. Then you've got the reality check. There is such a thing as gravity. There is there's a budget there. There are other stakeholders who might throw up objectives, and so this is this is when you're taking, this is the phase of the exercise when you're kind of taking it to the other stakeholders. This is kind of the reality check moment. So now you think, well, what is it that can be changed? And this is the chance to find out now, before it gets too late, if there are any other variables or things that will be impactful upon the project. Just going to take a quick drink now. Ashley, thanks for that comment. I'll make sure I come back to that. By the way, right. So that was the theory of it all. What about the practice of it? So as I've said or implied already, the thing that we want to do is to be able to define the end result. To start with the end in mind, to use the quote from the famous Seven Habits book. What you want to be able to do is get to the point, and by defining what the end result could be in hard metrics, then that would be by definition something you can measure and certify when you've completed the space. So it's really important to use the standards in there. We both in Avixa and in visual displays, there are various calculators and aids of making the use of standards much easier. Standards are an absolute blessing once you start to use them, and they help it all the way around. And what you're aiming to do is to create these performance specifications for every aspect of the room. If you can think about the in terms of those sort of the incremental improvements that they do in high level sport, in elite sport, if you can just make those incremental improvements in every aspect that we talk about, then that does represent a significant impact on the result that you have. So it's all about the completed result. When it comes to standards, in Avixa, this is just a list, probably slightly out of date now, but the upper half of the table are the standards that we already have that are available. The other standards are those that are in development or being rewritten. By the way, there is some sort of prospect to kind of oxygenate and disseminate some of the standards as they are in development, because what we're doing now within the standards group is, for those who are interested, instead of going straight out to public review, we have what's called a technical review, where we engage with subject matter experts and other interested partners in order to be able to do that. But the Avixa standards are just part of the piece. For example, in my professional life that involves with lighting, my professional body is CIBSE in the UK. That's the Certified Institute of Building Services Engineers, but the subset of that is the SLL, Society of Light and Lighting. And this is a bit like this is very much the equivalent of the IES in the States, but they have a number of guidelines for lighting within the different types of spaces within the built environment, and they're very useful. But the thing that I think is a real game changer, and is that there is this well building standard from the International Well Building Institute based out of New York, and now there's a version 2 of that, and this is an incredible standard because it takes a holistic view of the whole space. It is very much about, as it says on the tin, it's about making buildings that are well buildings. People coming back into the workspace now, into the office, in order for the owners and landlords to make these spaces and employees to make these spaces attractive, being seen to attend to those sorts of aspects, and having the guidance and the metrics by which to get there is very helpful. But the thing is that the thing that's particularly relevant to AV professionals, or those who procure AV, those who use AV. On the call today, we've got people from the end user community, we've got consultants, we've got integrators. We've got a big spread of people, from across the food chain. The well building standard, it really is a fantastic thing, because what it's done is it's taken, if you like, it's taken the parts that are needed from all of these standards. So it's taken on lighting, on space lighting, it's taken some elements out from Society of Light and Lighting and the IES. and so forth. But it's a very, very practical thing because it gives actual hooks that where we can link the buildings, the built environment standards to the AV standards, and that applies to displays, lighting, acoustics, and it's a very happy thing. I'll talk about one aspect of that to do with my thing with lighting and displays, further down the line. But for those of you who don't know well, I really advise you to check it out. I think what we'll see, overlapping in our area are many more practitioners in well, and many more projects driven by well is a fantastic way of dealing with the other stakeholders, particularly the architects, because in order to get a high score in well, there are all sorts of opportunities for architects to get bonus points, and the AV can help the architects get these bonus points. So there's actually a motivation for architects and the senior stakeholders to engage with it. So and it doesn't matter what kind of enterprise it is, whether it's a campus, a university, a college, whether it's an office building. well, I think is something of great significance, and I'm a big evangelist for it, as you could probably tell. So what I've got here are some examples, just an example table, just to pull from something that I've done in the past. Looking about how we apply the performance metrics across the board. There's no particular learnings from that. It's just, if you like, an example or an illustration of taking a structured approach. Right, so sort of, we climbed our way down through sort of examples of a bad space, and we'll just quickly climb our way back out, emphasizing the positives. So here's an example of a room where the layout is improved, it's uncluttered. The display is a good size. The height of it has been thought about. We're not going to go into that here, but the height of the display is going to be massively important as a push-pull thing, because there's the issue of camera position, and there's also the issue of ergonomics. What's the most suitable height for the users in the room? Then here we've got nice light wall coloring. There's nothing too shiny there, and it's all at the same kind of a level. So we've got nice even. It helps to provide nice even illumination throughout. The natural light has been shut out in this case, or maybe even harvested, when those sorts of things become available, and that's also helpful because as we mentioned before, if you use the Avixa's VC lighting guide, which is an essential document, I use it all the time. The advice is very much to keep the color temperature within a certain range, and of course daylight is a much higher color temperature than artificial light, and so that is a good way of helping to get a good result with the VC camera. Now, at this point, we're going to talk about the key elements of lighting from a VC camera perspective. And the principles there is it's about getting a balance between the key lighting, that's the direct lighting from luminaires, and that provides the detail and the contrast within, for example, a person's face when seen through a camera, and then fill lighting, which comes from ambient light and reflected light, but particularly reflected light from the table, because if you think about it, the table is a large. You've got downlighting in the room typically, and you've got a metering table there. The table itself is actually a significant form of lighting. So that mixture of fill lighting and key lighting, that is the balance between that is is a key, excuse the pun, but a key part of the way that I look at lighting schemes when I look at that with clients and colleagues. So thinking about lighting now, and also thinking about the WELL standard and how it hooks into the AV standards. In AV standards, when we talk about image quality, we talk about contrast. But the problem with contrast is that's a relative thing. It doesn't say how bright or how dark the image should be. It just basically says that the difference between the light part and the dark part of the image should be X to 1, typically 15 to 1 on a checkerboard contrast using the PISCAR and now the new ISCAR standard. But what in the lighting guides, in order to avoid asthenopia, which is the fancy word for eye strain, it's really important that the range of luminances within a room space are limited. And so luminance is the word for light that is either reflected from a surface or emitted from example, from a display or a luminaire. And we measure that in candela per square meter, and the short form for that is calling it nit, which is much easier. And then the other form of light that we think about in this context is illuminance, which is the fancy word for ambient light, and we measure that in lux, lux being lumens per square meter, which to relate that back to projector lumens. Now, the important thing within a room design is that as you look around the space, it's important that all of the surfaces that you look at, including the people, your colleagues, fall within a certain range of luminance, because our eyes are muscles, and if for example the display is too bright, which it very often is, or you can see within your eye line a bright luminaires. What that means is your eyes are working up and down. We've got these ciliary muscles in our eyes which expand and contract the iris and the lens, and that is the source of eye strain. Is which during the course of a day or a work session, your eyes are adjusting too much. And the way that we monitor that, which is in the environmental and the WELL standard, is to think in terms of task luminance ratio. So that is to say, is the ratio you want to keep within 3 to 1 typically, the range of luminances that the eye looks at on all the key things. And so this is where what I call the Goldilocks effect, not too sweet, not too salty. And then it's just getting these things balanced, and this is very much typifies the reason why it's so important to think about the room space in a holistic way, because one thing impacts another. That is that. The display itself, again, that's just to repeat myself here, but that must not be too bright. It's actually all about the black levels in the image. I'm not going to go into that too much here because the displays is a separate subject. I'm just looking at high level at room design, and then you look at the screen as the display as a source of light as well, because the display itself has an impact on the environment. Again, so looking at this again, it's getting it in balance, the Goldilocks effect, and using the task luminance ratio, using these standards. That's the way of pulling this thing together and to be able to address it in a structured way. And by breaking it down into those sorts of pieces, then, or those sorts of component parts, then that's the way of getting a good result in that respect. Now, when it comes to actually how you do the thing of balancing the lighting and display, then it's actually very simple, he said, to be able to get a good lighting result. If you go into the SLL or the IES lighting codes, there's just a handful of hard metrics that you need to give to a lighting designer, in order to be able to get what you want. There's no, like I say, there's no fixed way of of doing this. It's about getting the achieved result. There are more than one ways to skin a cat, unless you play for West Ham United, of course. But the thing is that the beauty about giving these metrics out is that you're basically empowering the lighting professional, the lighting designer, to give you a good result, but relying on her or his ability and creativity to be able to do that. And using these kinds of metrics is actually very helpful, because it sets the constraints, but it doesn't say how you should do it. But again, this is just an example of my approach. This is, if you like, a bit of a word from our sponsor. I just chuck this slide in here in a very unsubtle kind of a way. But this is an example of the move to these lower luminance, higher contrast displays. These are completely matte displays. So this is where all natural surface reflectances from the remote participants and their spaces. So these are rendered then as primary cues from the projection, and not from being trapped, if you like, in an aquarium behind a sheet of shiny glass, delivering the image on a matte screen. Because if you think about it, the real metric for or a benchmark, if you like, for being able to read and work for a long time is the printed page. And the thing about a printed page is that it's low luminance, high contrast, and high definition. And that in itself gives the clues about what's needed in order to be able to have displays and have lighting where you can work all day. Again, our ideal space with our lovely cartoon people. All the surfaces there have been ensured that they're not too shiny, and they've got the light reflectance factor. We do reflectance factors in as a percentage. The furniture has been dealt with. It's again the Goldilocks thing: not too stiff, not too comfy, so people doze off. But the tabletop grey, by the way, pale grey is a very good colour for a tabletop. That has been optimised too, and the temperature and ventilation, the H&V part of that has been dealt with. Not least because of the noise. I mean, to get to at least NR30 is really the benchmark to go for. But then there are various building standards there as well. But as I say, it's an example of a metric that we work to. So hopefully that was helpful as I kind of worked our way through that. But the thing is that still leaves all these other elements there to think about. How, what technology is going to be used to deliver these conditions, or these cues, the experience within the room. And of course, that's what AV brings to the party. It brings this experience, this audiovisual experience, into the free space of the room and delivers it. But as you can see, I think of it very much in terms of a pre-technology call. This approach is completely agnostic about which technology you use, and hopefully it's helpful to have a kind of a fresh look and to work in a collaborative way with the various stakeholders to get to that. So this is the context of this presentation, this webinar is thinking about how to deliver good experience within within Teams rooms, within hybrid spaces. Just a quick word from our sponsor here, forgive me, is that that we've worked very hard to come up with displays that tick these boxes in terms of being able to deliver the image size at the right budget, but the right technical characteristics too. And we think of these as in terms of we call it the digital canvas, because thinking about the layout of a large Teams front row display, where you're going to have effectively picture in picture. It is very much about going up to much larger image sizes than has been thought about. But we also, think about making these. These are examples of doing them in a freestanding way, using ultra short throw projection. We can build them into credenza style units. The camera can be fitted there, whether it's a bar, a rally bar camera, or that's actually a rally camera that's on there now. But they can be done with conventional projection too. But it's about curating the right combination of projector and screen, ambient light rejecting screen, but in conjunction with considering the lighting and the situation that you have. The other thing about the room design is that we feel that and this is very early days, the front row and the Microsoft Teams front row. I think it's a very exciting concept. But one of our initial reactions to that is that we feel it very likely that people will be more comfortable in when if a very wide screen is curved is at least slightly curved, to give a kind of more feeling of reciprocity in terms of how you present to of how the remote participants present themselves to you. It's more in the round and not sort of as a sort of the usual suspects. And those sorts of more organic designs are where we think we're going to go. This is just an example, by the way. It's an illustration of a two projector way of delivering the widescreen room designs for Teams rooms. Microsoft themselves, if you look at their documentation, they've moved to projection in these visions of the future that they've put out for us to use. And that's and this is just an example of one of our kind of design approaches and reactions to that. But as I say, this is very much a learning phase for all of us, and I'm not being prescriptive here. I think that one of the points that of me doing these webinars, of me doing these postings, is that I really think that there's a lot to learn, and that's a collaborative process from this. And by kind of engaging in this way, really looking to get feedback from as many of you as possible. Criticism's a lot. It's not about trying to peddle a particular line. I think it's about being responsive to what the user needs are, but it's to actually understand what those user needs are, and that can only happen by talking to people. At the moment, I'm on a bit of a tour of university campuses. I'm really we're very heavily engaged with HE in visual displays, and again, I'm looking to learn as much as I can about the actual practical issues that are there. So we've done well for time. I've managed to zoom my way through this. Hopefully, that wasn't too much of a whistle stop. These slides, you will get these after the event. So I think we'll take. I'll have a look at any questions now that we've got in the channel. Actually, you lot are fairly quiet and restrained, and today we haven't got that many questions in. Let's have a look. So, Tom, many AV professionals are familiar with loudspeaker modeling, typically 6 octaves of information, how it behaves in the space given the materials in the space. Tom, that you are a very well respected professional in that respect. Tom is an Infocommunics colleague of mine. I think that's more of I agree with that. That's more of a statement than a question. And also, I would be very quick to point out that it's outside my real area of experience and expertise. And so Tom also asked, why have the same AV professionals taken up lighting modeling? It's only one octave of information and also deals with materials reactivity in the space. I don't know quite how to take that question, Tom. I think are you saying it's one aspect of information, but and also deals with materials in space? I think, at the moment, relatively few AV professionals are getting involved with lighting modeling, but I think it's a massive opportunity for professionals. I think the first thing is to have an awareness of it, and then to be able to engage with the other professionals. By definition, you're never going to know as much as a kind of a dedicated lighting designer. It's about engaging with these people. So Eduardo, you have asked, any thoughts about using projection when requiring whiteboarding capabilities? Well, from that, Eduardo, I'm not sure what to infer from that it's about whether you want to project onto a whiteboard. The unfortunate truth is, particularly in hybrid spaces, that doesn't mix. To project onto a whiteboard just doesn't work. The thing about hybrid spaces, Teams rooms, and using projection is that once you get above 100 inches, you basically have to use projection until you get to the point where you use very high resolution DV-LED displays, and the kind of awful black levels and contrast that you would get in a teaching space where students are used to seeing very low contrast, PowerPoint or whatever. That just doesn't wash when it comes to this kind of thing. When you're looking at someone on a camera, you've just got to have the good contrast. So the whiteboard has to be a separate thing with a separate camera. But having said that, there are very good ways of doing that. Huddly got a lovely thing. You've got perspective control, but that's just an example. One thing I would say, though, just as a design point with whiteboards, is that in these spaces, I don't think they should be white. My preferred color in that is pale grey, because again, you've got to think about how that's going to work with the VC camera. So it's about getting that, and also what I like clients or suggest people use is to use quite big fat whiteboard pens, so to encourage people to write in larger type, so that when it is going to be seen by remote participants through a whiteboard camera, then that's one way of if you like, helping the behaviors of other people. And Tom, you have come back and said, so if we can do loudspeakers, why are we not doing lighting rather than relying on others? Well, that, Tom, is the $64,000 question. And I think that is an opportunity that's there. I think that in practice, thinking about hybrid room space, that's something that we tend to get involved with when things have gone wrong, and trying to put it right when you've got a really rubbish result. And I think it is about putting it out there that we can do that. But I think it's a two-part proposition. One is about whether you are going to, as part of the project team, you're going to influence getting a good result, and then it's a question of how far into the nuts and bolts of it you want to get. Whether you're going to do like a lighting design, or whether you're actually going to do the lighting scheme itself. One of the companies that I work with, they work with low voltage systems that can work from the rack, and so that and if anybody's interested, then ping me about that. But that's one practical way of doing it. So I think that if you've got the lighting that relates to the room function, the VC, the UC room functions, and I think that is a genuine opportunity. It's very early days, but I think that it's an opportunity for the Pro AV people on the supply side. But just in terms of the thinking from an end user perspective, I think the kind of the point about my presentation today was it's actually about asking the professionals involved to giving them the metrics about what's needed, but then that's fine. But then leaving it to them to deliver it in the way that they want. Well, hopefully I have answered those questions. There was something from Ashley. Ashley Tishel said, doesn't current office design move the workspaces to the outside and bring the meeting rooms into the core away from natural light? Well, yes, that is one trend, and I think there's a very big there's a big thing here, possibly a conflict or a balance, which is that the use of natural light is very important in modern spaces. In warm climates, then you've got issues of heat dissipation, but very often a lot of these a lot of spaces, or the spaces that we have to think about the design for, they're kind of a given. I think that the kind of the modern office or campus facility, natural light plays a very important part, but managing that, whether it's with blinds, whether it's with switchable foils and so forth, it is necessary, because in the end you just have to decide how important it is that the users at the other end of a session, the remote participants, how important it is that they get a good result through the video. So I think I've run that one down to a close for now. Lot of slides there, but hopefully fairly graphical and moved at a reasonable pace. But hopefully that you will you'll find those useful and interesting when we send them to you afterwards. So just finally, a word about my company and what we do. I think one thing that's become more apparent over the last year is that people haven't had a lot of clarity about how they engage with us, because we do a lot of different things. We do the specialist consultancy. By the way, that is not AV consultancy. That is my specialisms, and I very often work for or with AV consultants. So I've got to be very, very careful to make that one clear. But we do design, and we're also design consultants. We manufacture these displays. We've got a background in simulation, and a lot of the IP and the tools that we use to do that. Those are the things that we already have that we can bring to the party, and that's why we're so excited with these new front row configurations, because we're ready to build these displays right now. But having said that, I do feel very strongly that, at least for the time being, that they do need to be bespoke. They need to be delivered on a case-by-case basis. This is not, again, this is a prime example of things not being, a cookie cutter. They have to fit the space exactly. So, whether you take a whole solution from us or just a little part of it, just some design, some specialist installations, some specialist engineering, I think the way that we describe ourselves, we'd like to fit the project team, as needed. But we work with. I work actively with all parts of the channel. I work very closely with campuses, a number of people with the AV user group. I'm very proud to be associated with the AV user group. For those of you who aren't a member of those end users who aren't a member of that, check out this, which is run by my friend and colleague Owen. I'm very proud to make presentations like these to them too. But that's how we kind of fit into the food chain. But anything that we supply in terms of hardware and solutions, that comes exclusively through the channel. That comes exclusively through the reseller and integrated channel. I deal extensively with end users, and some of the consultancy I do is it goes directly. But in terms of the real meat of what Visual Displays does, that is exclusively through the reseller channel. So just as we wrap up and coming up to that, I'd like to thank everyone for coming on. Next Tuesday, I'm taking a kind of a more specific and deep dive into the 21:9 aspect ratio that's been released in the front row, and also looking at the wider aspect ratios as well. Thanks very much indeed for coming. I hope to see you on another webinar, and please look out for the materials that will come to you in the next day or so. I'll stay online now if anybody wants to chat or anything, but otherwise I'd just like to thank everyone for showing up today. Thank you. Well, we're getting just nice comments. Thank you so much for the nice comments, everyone. It's been great to see you. Hanno, every integrator should hire a lighting expert. Well, I think getting involved with one is a good move for sure. Thank you, Wolfgang. Gavin, thanks. Leslie, thanks everyone. These are lovely comments. Nice to see you, Jim. Actually, the next one is on Tuesday at the same time, and that's going to be about. I'm going to look at the specifics of displays with these weird and wonderful new aspect ratios, thinking about the resolution and the actual performance metrics and how we produce them. It's quite an interesting subject, but there's just a couple of knotty things that need to be looked at. Right, well, I think I've talked myself and you into a standstill. Thanks again for everyone's participation, easy for me to say, the chat and the questions. Please ping me, email me with any questions, or message me on LinkedIn, whatever you want. This is a very interactive subject, and I'm doing this in order to learn more. So thanks again, and hope to see you on the next call.